bad addict. Every time I was able to get a loan, I was doing drugs.
I've been to prison 4 times, twice in the state, twice in the fed.
I was doing all this crazy stuff, cooking drugs and just staying high.
God called me from a prison cell. I was a homeless drug addict, and my hope was found in a needle.
I was 8 months pregnant, homeless, living out of my van.
You know, it wasn't Freeway that saved me, it wasn't John Stroup that saved me, but God uses Freeway in such a mighty way as a tool to reach these people.
There's not a community or a county in America that doesn't have a drug problem. And the church has the answer, and it's the gospel of Jesus Christ. Welcome to One Broken Life. My name is John Stroup with my special guest, Jake Miller. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's going to be a new experience for me.
Yeah, so One Broken Life is a podcast to where we explore the intimate details of people's lives. And so, a big mess makes a big message. And there's a lot of different unique people we've had on this podcast. But I think this is going to be unique in many ways. And so I'm excited that you came to join us. Jake, you've been my friend a long time. I respect you. I know you. I trust you. I feel like you're a man of integrity. And so there's going to be people who watch this and listen to this from prison. There's going to be people who, there's pastors and moms and dads and different kinds of people who listen to this. And so I feel like God had put it on my heart to invite you in. And so one of the theme verses for me is Philippians chapter 1, verse 12. Paul said, "Brethren, I want you to know that things which happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel." And so Paul, the things that he uses, that pronoun things, it's everything that happened in the past, the things that were going on in the prison that he was in, and he didn't complain, he didn't dramatize it. He just said the things, my past and the things that have happened to me have turned out for the furtherance of the gospel. And so that's what my prayer is for you in this podcast. And so let's just start. Introduce yourself, where you're from, your upbringing.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate it. So my name's Jacob Miller, kind of born and raised Southwest Missouri. Done a lot of traveling over the years, but kind of always came back here, seems like. I grew up in Pleasant Hope, which is kind of north of Springfield, small rural community. Grew up in the small country church, out there. Definitely part of my history. You want to go into like even current life?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll walk through that. We'll just start there.
Okay.
Childhood, what was that like?
Yeah, childhood. When it comes to childhood, I think it was really probably characterized by two things. I mean, my relationship with my dad and my mom, obviously. There was a lot of dysfunction in their marriage growing up. A lot of those kind of things that shaped me. They got divorced when I was 12. And probably the other big guiding force in my life at that time was the church. Like I said, grew up in the small country church, kind of two of them. Actually, there, one on my grandma's side, one on my grandma on my dad's side. The other one, my grandma on my mom's side. Those were the two country churches I kind of grew up in and shaped a lot of my thinking whenever in my younger days.
Okay. So you were raised in church.
Absolutely, yeah. Raised with a lot of knowledge. I grew up in small, Baptist churches. I mean, I grew up in Sunday school. I was a reader. I read the Bible 2 or 3 times whenever I was a kid, and I knew a lot of the information, but missed a lot of the heart, I think.
So how old were you whenever your parents got divorced?
I was 12.
So you're preteen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's a pretty rough time to have a traumatic event like that. You've already got the things going on in your body and in your life at that age. So what happened? How did that affect your life?
Well, whenever I was in it, if you'd asked me, I'd have been like, doesn't affect me at all, which was a complete lie. I just was a kid and didn't recognize the ways that it affected me. I was, when my mom told us, I've got a brother 4 years older than me, when she told us that they were getting divorced, she was upset about it, and kind of oddly enough, we were kind of like, okay, like almost like happy, so that was really, that really shaped us, I think, a lot, from the standpoint of like just how it affected me with her. I acted like it didn't bother me, but then, going into 13, 14 years old, especially once I started driving, I'd run around with my brother and the people he was running around with, even when I was younger. I was very angry. I would say probably angry and nearly completely directionless would be the way I would sum it up.
And how old were you through your teenage years?
Yeah, that happened really from 12 when they got divorced all the way through my teenage years, probably all the way up until I was 24 when I became a father.
So you were angry?
Yeah.
Did you complete school?
Yeah. My mom was in it to win it. She had a lot of struggled with a lot of different things and kind of trying to be a single mom and all those kind of things. Definitely didn't get everything right, but she was in it, and I derived a lot of stability from her, I think, and from my grandmas on both sides. My grandma on my dad's side, the Miller side, and my grandma on my mom's side. It was strong women that carried me through, and I had no idea that's what it was, at the time.
So you didn't have a strong masculine figure in your life.
Not that communicated very well. I did have both of my grandpas, but that generation, my grandpa on my mom's side was a World War II veteran, and kind of very typical. I'm here, I'm providing, but I'm not talking, I'm not connecting, So I wouldn't say I didn't have a strong masculine figure, but I didn't have one that was really, that I connected with, in a meaningful way, I think, probably the way I'd put it.
So I guess there was a wedge between you and your dad from the divorce.
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, we weren't close. When they got divorced, we were definitely not close. Things got worse during that time, and that persisted probably all the way up into my late 20s before we were really reconciled.
So when did you give your life to Jesus?
Gave my life to Jesus whenever I was 6 years old.
Okay.
Vacation Bible School, Brighton Baptist Church. It was a simple kid's prayer, simple faith, decision. And even whenever I went through my years of rebellion, I do believe that the Lord ultimately, brought me through that, disciplined me through it as a son. But I do believe that I was saved, even though I strayed for years and years. And I'd have to think about it, how many years it was,
So you're in your 20s, right? Mm-hmm. And so as you know, and others may or may not know, we lead a recovery ministry here. And mm-hmm. so we have homes all over the United States, and then I think we have 13 under our umbrella here in the southern Missouri area. And then we have our outreach on Saturday night, and I don't even know how we became friends. Do you know how we crossed paths? Was it Freshwater?
It was before Freshwater, I think, but honestly, I don't remember that. It might have been through Mike A. because I knew him through other church, relationships before Freshwater and all that. But I can't really remember now what it was.
So you've been involved here with us, mm-hmm. and so you're in your 20s, and I don't want to spill the beans on what you did for a career for a long, long time. But So just tell us what happened. You can take us there. So your 20s, you're angry, you're kind of trying to figure it out. In your own words, you were in rebellion against God, basically doing your own thing, and I would assume that means you were in sin.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
And so then you said you had your son. Mm-hmm. So walk us through that. Like, what transpired to change that rebellion and that anger until, how did that affect you?
Yeah, so, I graduated high school when I was 17. I started school when I was 4, so I was a little young. For the next 7 years of my life, I did absolutely nothing meaningful, really. I just had no direction. I was a 3-time dropout with college. Everybody's like, you got to go to college to be something, and so I went but didn't know why I was there, and I just would drop out. I was working construction work. Most of the men in my family did blue-collar work, Had a lot of good intentions during those years, but really got nowhere and ended up hurting a lot of people in spite of my good intentions, because I just didn't have any direction and wisdom. in my life. I actually I got into martial arts whenever I was young, and I actually broke my elbow and had to have surgery, and wrestling. And, I remember at the time I come out of that, had to have a complete, like a restructure of my elbow. And I remember coming out of that, in a sling and not able to work for like several months. And then I remember thinking, I need a grown-up job, because I was just working wherever, making hourly wage. And when it rains, you don't get paid, whatever, that kind of stuff. And then I got injured and I couldn't do that work, so I thought, man, I need to grow up and get a real job, what I thought was a real job at the time. And what I meant by that was something that has, sick leave and, regular paycheck and those kind of things. And so for me, it kind of came down to kind of fixated on firefighting or policing. And you had to have specific qualifications to get into fire in Springfield. And from my 3 times of dropping out over college and going for a semester here and there, I'd managed to kind of cobble together 66 credit hours of college out of 3 tries. And you had to have 60 credit hours to get on with Springfield PD. And so technically I was qualified. And so that catalyst kind of bumped me into getting on with the Springfield Police. And about that time, my son was born. I was going through the academy as my son was born. And really because of the challenges that I have in my relationship with my dad growing up, him being born profoundly affected me. And then seeing the things that I saw as a cop profoundly affected me, kind of rocked me. And I did not grow up sheltered. I mean, I grew up around, my dad was into Harley and biker and, dope and alcohol and all the people, there's all those people, and I saw all kinds of things growing up and experienced them. But becoming a cop, I was just like, I was still, even in spite of those things, I was floored, really, really challenged me a lot to think about, hey, who am I, and what am I doing?
So where'd you start out on law enforcement?
Well, I started out on the street like everybody does, several years. I think about the first 5 years was all street,
Here in Springfield, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
So you chased guys and did all that, pulled them over, and worked the beat.
Yep, work the beat. That's the street is the mothership. You stay there long enough, you go off and you do specialized assignments here and there, but you always come back to the street for a while and then you go. And so, yeah.
And so that street life, just kind of seeing, the things. I'm sure that you probably started off in the graveyard shift or late nights.
Oh yeah, overnights. Everybody does when you don't have any seniority. Yeah.
And so there you are. And I tell people this all the time, the only people out at 2 o'clock in the morning are the police and the bad guys.
For the most part. Yeah, you got people driving to work on second shift, every once in a while, but not a lot. That's true.
And so you're working that beat, that late night, that's when the action's at.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. When I was young, I loved it, it was all exciting and all those kind of things. And yeah, the more you do it though, the more you realize you shouldn't desire, drama and stress, because you got plenty coming anyways,
So your police career from the beat, where'd you go after that?
Oh, so man, I'm trying to think. I actually spent 3 years with the school police. I did 5 years with Springfield PD, and then I left because of my relationship with my son's mom and everything. Really just being dysfunctional. Both of us nobody ever taught us how to be anything, in those realms. I was doing a lot of single parenting, and working nights and single parenting doesn't go together. And so I actually left and went to the school police as an SRO here in Springfield for 3 years, because I just needed the schedule, needed the stability. And then I was there 3 years, and during that time I met my current wife. This was really part of those years where the Lord really put me in the anvil and just started shaping me, forging me, and calling me up and teaching me, fathering me. During those years, I really just, that's whenever I kind of incubated a lot. I didn't do anything, but I had my son, and if I wasn't at work, I had him, and when I put him to bed, I'd work out, in the house, and I'd read, and that's all I ever did for years, and so that was really shaped me, that time really shaped me a lot, I think, going into it.
And so when I met you, you were a child crime detective.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I did that for 4 years, yeah.
Yeah. And so how long were you a police officer?
Total 21. I met my wife while I was while I was an SRO. We got married. They had the lateral program with the PD, so I went back. We wanted her to be able to stay home. I needed to make more money than just working 9 months, you know. So I went back to SPD, then continued to pursue my career. Did 21 years total, you know. In the last 4 years that I was there, I was a child crimes detective. Yeah.
So 21 years as a police officer, how come you're not jaded against people who use drugs and alcohol and commit crime?
Oh man, because I understand the nature of depravity.
Because
I
I
think-
know it's hard, right? I mean, let's be real with each other, Jake. Like, I'm friends with a lot of cops, and never did I ever think I would have police officers who would be not only my friends, but my brothers.
Right.
You know, growing up as a bad guy and growing up as someone who was taught from a young age, never basically hate the police. I mean,
Right.
you know, that they are nothing good, they're all bad, you know, and they're the enemy from a child. We played cops and robbers, nobody wanted to be the cops.
Yep.
Nobody. Everybody was the robber
Yep.
growing up, you know, and I'm sure like it's different for your home. They play cops and robbers, everybody's the cop. You know?
Usually, yeah.
You know?
Not always, but usually,
and
I
so,
think, yeah.
So that was the culture I come from, and now, you know, my job, one of the things that I get to do is break criminal mentality in people. So I teach people all the time in our houses. You know, we have on Saturday, in our homes, we have a Thursday night class where everybody comes together. We have 50 men and women on average that come from Marshfield, Ashgrove, Springfield, you know, and these are residents. They live in our program. And so we are training them about, basically one of the things that we teach is that you will be a baby Christian. I don't care how long you've been saved. I don't care how much you know the Bible. As long as you have a criminal mentality, you're stuck on the bottle of Christianity. You will always be immature. You have to go past that. And so, but one of the things that I've learned from being friends with law enforcement, I mean, really good friends with a lot of cops, is that some of them have that mentality towards somebody that comes from my background just as bad. It's like the stigma is on them towards us. Like John Stroup may look this way or look that way, but he's always going to be a criminal. Because you're taught that, right?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, yeah, I would say yes, probably taught that, I think.
What does the academy teach?
You know, I don't think they really think that deeply about that. You know, I think the expectation, though, the unspoken expectation is that people don't change.
Yeah.
You know, that is probably baked in, I think. It was my faith that really helped me keep that in perspective, I think. You know, I used to tell people, I taught in the academy for a while, and I used to tell the young officers, I used to say, look, police work will change you. It will happen. There's nothing you can do about it. That it will change you. You won't come out of it unchanged. So what you need to do is you need to steer that.
Amen.
You know, you got to direct it, and you got to be mindful of how much it is changing you. Because if you don't, it'll ruin you on people. Absolutely. You know, so.
Well, if I look up the definition of criminal in the Webster's Dictionary, what do you think it says?
I don't know.
I know what it says. It
Yeah.
says one who committed a crime.
Okay, yeah.
And so
Yes,
by
somebody,
Webster's Dictionary, am I a criminal? I am.
Yeah.
And so if I look up, drug addict in the Webster's Dictionary, I'm a drug addict according to Webster's Dictionary. And so I tell people all the time, like, you can't let opinion or public opinion think for you. Like, you have to think for yourselves. Who the heck's Webster? Do you know who wrote the Webster Dictionary? You know their name? I don't either.
Yeah.
So who cares what they say about me, right?
Right.
And so it's cool that, you know, and I know several law enforcement that are not jaded. Not jaded. Like Sheriff Arnott, he's my friend. I can text him and text me back. If I need him to come here, if he didn't have anything going on today, he'd be here. I guarantee you.
Right.
He's my friend. He trusts me. I trust him. I don't think he's jaded. I've got some drug cop guys that are detectives that are trying to clean the streets up. Them guys aren't jaded either. But there's some that are.
Yeah.
And so you're a 21-year police officer, and God help you for the things you had to go through in your last 4 years and the things you had to see working child crimes. I cannot imagine, nor do I want you to have to relive any of that in this podcast. But so going through all that, I remember one of the things from you coming and being involved in Freeway, and you've come here before on Saturday, that there were people in the crowd that you moved into your house. Mm-hmm. I mean, you moved. Tell us about that situation. That's just a cool story. How God used you you went on a call, right?
Yeah, went on a domestic disturbance, not a big, nothing crazy going on, but a man and woman, arguing, and she was just kind of concerned that things are kind of going south, and come from a big past of dysfunctional relationships, and so yeah, I went there and talked to him, and we got it settled, and I ended up kind of counseling him. I pastored him a little bit, and they were really receptive. They were like, that was really cool. I appreciate you took the time to do that. And I ended up giving the guy my number, and we just ended up doing following up with him and getting him connected to local church, and down the road they kind of parted ways, in their relationship, and she didn't have anywhere to go, so we moved her and her kids in for a while and helped her get kind of a little bit stabilized, and then she ended up moving on, and so yeah, it was a good experience. Yeah,
that's cool, man. Mm-hmm. That says a lot about you and your family. But and so you've adopted, correct?
No, you've not adopted. I've got 4 kids, but we haven't adopted. No.
So through your process of time being a police officer, what happens after that? Where does that take you? What part of where are we at on that? Like being a child crime, because that was at the end. Well, you're a police officer. You're 21 years of experience. You're not jaded. You came here. You preached for me here before. Mm-hmm. And so through the process of time, as you go through, you came to a deciding factor of whether you're going to be a cop or a pastor, right?
Yeah, I was at a place where I just realized I was 45. I was going to have to stay another 10 years to be able to get my full retirement. I planted a church about 7 years before that. Well, I guess at the time it's probably about 5 years before that, 4.5. I planted a church, and it was growing and doing well, and becoming more demanding. There's just other areas of ministry that I had going on. I had a lot of irons in the fire, and I was at the age too where I was starting to realize, hey, I'm not getting any younger. Like physically I'm not, what I used to be. Mentally I'm not what I used to be. I can just kind of tell the very beginnings of those things, and kind of put it in perspective for me. And I was like, am I gonna give the 10 best years of my life that I got left to policing, or am I just gonna, step out there and just pursue ministry, with everything I got? And so my wife and I talked about it and just ended up taking the leap.
So where there's a little bit of a window there and we've missed, and I just want to relive that and go back to that. But so when did you know you were called to be a pastor?
Well, so before I planted, I had to think about the years. This is probably 10 years ago, 12 years ago. My wife and I moved out to Pleasant Hope, and so we were a part of Life Point Church in Ozark at the time. That was kind of too far, and so we really didn't, there wasn't a good fit for us as far as church, went out there in terms of like healthiness and, wanting to, move forward and, out there. And so we ended up, really God kind of orchestrated a meeting between myself and the lead pastor of Freshwater. I went to a conference, just kind of ran into the guy. We just started talking and just connected, discipleship and the church and all these things. And so we ended up attending Freshwater Springfield here on the north side from that. And then I had been in different leadership roles, never been a pastor before, but I'd been in different leadership roles in the church for several years, quite a while at that point. And I remember talking to JT, and he just asked me, he said, hey, I talked to Lane Harrison, he was the pastor at Life Point, about you and your background of helping lead in different ways. And he's like, what do you think about, being a pastor? Have you ever thought about that? And at the time, I remember what I told him. I said, hey, I think if you look at the pastoral qualifications in the Bible, it's mainly maturity. It's mainly Christian. You're being a mature man. It's your only thing you have to be able to do is you have to be able to teach. The rest of it's character. And so I told him, I said, I really think that a man has a responsibility to lead in the church. We say men should lead their wives. We say men should lead their children. But then we kind of let everybody off the hook when it comes to leading in the church. And I don't think every man's called to be a pastor. But I just kind of believe that as you grow and mature, leadership as a man should be in the church even should be something you accept responsibility for. And that's the way I put it to him. I said, I'm open to it because I think that it's something men should be willing to do. Yeah. And God had put a burden on me, for people and leading and shepherding, and I'm not trying to take away from that, but that was our conversation. That's how I ended up becoming a pastor.
So you're a pastor, you're a church planter, you leave Freshwater, plant a church, right?
Yeah, I was a discipleship pastor at Freshwater for 5 years, leave there, go plant a church out in Pleasant Oak.
Where you're from. Mm-hmm. And you probably got a ragtag group of misfits out there helping
Absolutely, love them to death, yep. Yeah, a bunch of blue collar, country folk, love them. We are the church. That's one of the things I say. We don't go to church. We are the church, and so we are the church. Sometimes we just put a sign on the door and say, "Hey, we're down at the river. Here's a pen. Come join us," kind of thing. So it's country for sure.
That's cool.
But love it, yeah.
And so God has used you in ministry before you planted a church. I mean, you were in ministry as a police officer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of the time, yeah.
I remember, and I'll just share the story as we became friends, and we ain't hung out in a while.
Yeah,
but
get busy.
We need to. But I asked you to preach here on a Saturday night. Uh-huh. And so you preached for me, and I had a woman in the woman's house. And we got her from, she was dropped off at a tow yard. And this guy in this tow yard said, I could find you a place. And there was another program that he was going to get her into, and she had to sit in the office of the tow company for all day long waiting for him to come back. And she's like, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to be able to make it here all day long. I need help. And one of the desk workers called my wife, and we put her in detox. And then she came into our program, and she had these two little boys in Joplin, and it was a Jerry Springer episode in Joplin. I'll just put it to you like that. It was not healthy. It was not good. And so she did really good in our program, and she was, communication with her boys, and the state had her sons in custody, but her mother was raising them. And but they were in the state's custody with her mom, guardianship. So her mom called her and said, you need to come home. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm giving them back to the state. Well, her baby's daddy and her daughter were hooked up and living in her mom's house together.
Okay.
So, which, I mean, just to think about how messed up that is.
Yeah.
But that was the reality, and it's come home, come back here. And she's like, I can't come back. So we found a foster family for her little boys to come stay with. And anyways, so you call me. Mm-hmm. Everything's going great. Everything's going really good. She's connecting with her boys. One of them had been nonverbal. He stopped talking when his mom went away, and man, this girl's a champion, and she's just doing so good. And then he had a fever, and the foster mom called her and said, hey, he's got a fever. I've been giving him Tylenol and ibuprofen and switching them, and everything's been fine, and it's kept down. I just want you to know. And then that next morning, you call me, mm-hmm. and you said, hey, this is business.
Right.
Do you remember you telling me that? This is not a pastoral call. Do you have so-and-so in your program? And I said, yeah. And you said, well, her son was found dead this morning.
Yep.
In the house of the foster parent. And I guess he had a seizure and died. Yeah. And from a fever, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the hardest things I ever did was, I made a mistake by not having my wife with me that day, but we went over there, and I had to tell this girl that her son was dead.
Yeah.
And you were with me through that. And we did his funeral here in Freeway. And I remember just your compassion as a police officer through that and being a part of that. And I don't know how many years ago that was. It's been
a while. I do remember that day. I remember when we sat down there to talk with her, one of the things that I said to her is I said, your hope today isn't the same thing it was in yesterday. That's Jesus. I said, you need Jesus for this just as much as you need Jesus for tomorrow or the day before this. It doesn't change. He's the only answer.
Well, she wanted to quit, mm-hmm. of course.
Yeah.
And women from the church would go sit with her in that house, and as she cried and wept. And so what's cool is her grandson, who was also, he's nonverbal. Her daughter, unfortunately, is a drug addict, and she got custody of her grandson, who is nonverbal. She's the legal guardian, and she's raising him now, and he looks like her husband.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and so he's about the same age as her son was when he passed away.
Wow.
And anyways, and she actually works for a very well-known nonprofit in town. She's got a career. She's clean. She's sober. The case is closed. Her son, who she has now, is just thriving. And so I imagine, I tell people all the time, if God calls you to be a plumber and you become a preacher, you're taking second best. God can use you as you minister, no matter what you do.
Absolutely.
So your police officer job is a ministry, and so God used you through that. And so, so what's life look like? What does life look like for Jake today?
Well, church. Our church is 7 years old. It's transitioning from a plant to an established church. It's it's growing, and kind of has grown up in some ways over the years. It's just presenting new challenges. My wife is like awesome. I mean,
me too.
I couldn't do any of this stuff without her, no doubt. But so our marriage is, I'm just still learning a lot about that. I pray all the time, like, make me a good husband, because she is awesome.
Putting up with your being
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And my kids are great. My oldest is getting ready to graduate from C of O, and my youngest is 11. So I got, a few down in the house still. So yeah, I'm super busy with ministry stuff across the board. Got a leadership academy ministry that I do, I pursue as well. The church, tons of relationships and responsibilities, that come with all that. My wife carries a ton of that, with me. But yeah, just, love being married, love being a dad, love being a pastor, even though it's not always easy. All those things can be difficult, but they're great, so.
Ministry is suffering.
A lot of it is.
It's one of the main things Paul says in Colossians. I'm preaching a series just a couple weeks in a row here on Colossians chapter 1, 24 through Colossians chapter 2, verse 24. Ministry 101 from the Apostle Paul.
Yeah.
And the first thing he says is I want you to know how much I suffer for you. It's like, when we think of ministry, sometimes we get a different idea of what it looks like. And I guess that depends on, who you listen to, who your mentors are. But it's you're called to suffer like Christ suffered. You're called to bear that affliction with people.
Yeah.
So that transition into a pastoral role for you was pretty smooth.
It really was. It was pretty smooth. I mean, there's been tons of bumps along the way, but there's been great moments too. But probably one of the most, I don't know if you, like,
Go ahead.
Something comes to mind, when I think about, like, probably some of the greatest moments of pastoring for me. One that really probably is most directly applicable to this conversation. We were, for a while there before COVID, we got kicked out when COVID came in. For a while, we were doing prison ministry, jail ministry in the Polk County Jail, and we would go in there, we'd share our testimony, in a short lesson, and it's small, there's, I think, like 10 guys to a pod or so. And I remember it was my turn to share, and so I was sitting there thinking, there was a guy doing a lesson, and I was going to share my testimony. And the whole time I was sitting there thinking, I was like, am I going to tell these guys I'm a cop? Because I was just like, I don't know how it's going to go over, even if it was just a distraction, I didn't want that. I didn't necessarily think it was just going to blow up in anything huge. I mean, I guess it could, but I was real unsure of myself. But that's part of my testimony. Being a cop is part of my testimony. It's part of my challenge, of reconciling things and, really wrestling with the Lord, and all. That was huge part of it. And I remember, I just kind of settled. I was like, it's my testimony. I'm just going to share my testimony and trust the Lord with whatever happens, because, You know, it is what it is. You know, I'm not going to operate out of fear. And so I'm sitting there in the middle of this pod, you know, surrounded by all these guys sharing my story. And I share with them my brokenness and my past and, you know, my struggle with sin and you know, tell them how I gave it to Christ and, you know, how Christ restored me and is continuing to restore me. And, you know, and I tell them like, you know, like we're all have sinned. The Bible says all have sinned, not, you know, only certain bad people have sinned, but all people are bad, you know. And I just told him, hey, you know, that old line, like the ground at the foot of the cross is level. We all come to it at the same place. Yeah. And you know, and I share my testimony with them. And at the end of that, you know, I was kind of like, I finished my, you know, shared, and I was just like, okay, how's that going to go over? And several of those guys stood up and started walking over towards me. And I was just kind of like, you know, they're not real aggressive or anything, but I was just kind of, I didn't know what to expect. And man, that first guy walk over to me and he puts out his arms and he wants me to hug him, you know. And so I did, man, I hugged him. You know, we're both like, you know, but I was just like, you know, and then probably about half those guys that were in there did, you know, they just lined up, man, they just lined up. And they said, man, thank you for just being real, you know, and saying what you said, you know. Man, and things like that. I mean, that's where moments like that are where you really understand the power of the gospel, you know, for your life and anyone's life. Amen. You know, for sure. So, I mean, there's been tons of challenges with pastoring and copping, you know, over the years, but there's a few bright shining moments in there where you see the Lord really work and you're like, okay, like, I get it. You know, I lost track of it there for a while because I got so busy or whatever, but every so often he shows you in a way you just can't miss.
I was talking to a guy yesterday. He called me. He's in St. Louis, and he was went through our program and went and helped run a Freeway house in Florida for us for about a year. And then his mom had cancer, and he went back home to St. Louis to help take care of her. They're older in age, and his dad, and she passed away, and he's killing it, man. I told him, I said, this is the church you need to go check out, because he's St. Charles. He's actually in Wentzville, near St. Louis, and anyways, he's walking down the street, and he sees construction going on. He's a carpenter, dude's sharp. He can do anything. And he says, hey, you know anybody looking for, or he called the number on the sign of the company doing the construction. And the guy said, I'll be there in a minute. And he shows up to the job and talks to Brett. His name's Brett. And he said, here's the plan. See you tomorrow. By the way, I go to this church. And it was the same church I told him he needed to check out. Yeah. And so he starts going to this church and has some conflict with some issues, not in the church, just some outside family stuff, and builds a relationship with this pastor, and a real good relationship. And this pastor killed himself this week. Wow. And anyways, Brett was called by the associate pastor, not of the church he goes to, of a different church. The guy didn't pastor the church I sent him to. And he said, hey, would you come to this Bible study? And, you know, Brett spoke at this guy's funeral and stuff. And yeah, he just called me yesterday, and he's like, I just don't feel qualified, you know. I don't feel like I think this may be just too much for me. And I said, Brett, God makes plans, and he doesn't ask for your permission. You didn't seek this out. Yeah. This associate of this man, I said, you need to honor your friend. And he said, okay. So he texted me today, and he said it went phenomenal. And he went and led this men's group in this church, and just went and shared his heart. And I guess, anyways, God used him in a big way. And so what I'm saying is this, like, we have make plans, but, you know, God orders our steps, and he doesn't ask permission when he makes a plan. He doesn't ask permission when he calls us to do it. Yeah, absolutely. This is God's thing. Yep. And God's got you right where he wants you, man. 100%. And super thankful for you sharing your story and being my friend. And I know we've talked about maybe doing a Freeway in Pleasant Hope. And, yeah, love to, yeah. And it'd be cool to, you know, have somebody who comes from your background be able to have that heart and that burden. You know, that's from the Lord. Yeah, absolutely. To give you that burden. 100%. Yeah. So is there anything that you want to share that we didn't cover, anything that you would like to say? Man, you know, I would just say the Lord restores, you know.
I shared a little bit about my relationship with my dad growing up, but the Lord really led me kind of in my late 20s to forgiveness for him. It took years, for me to really connect with him in forgiveness. But it helped both of us heal, and I remember this is several years back now, but I remember my kids when they were little, my dad, after we had reconciled, my dad, who came to Christ too late in life during those years, he came over one Christmas and brought presents for my kids, and he historically wasn't good about remembering birthdays and Christmas, and I have all those memories growing up. Man. But he brought my kids presents, over Christmas. Wasn't on the day, but over break, whatever. And so he gave them the presents, and then some of them were games. And my dad, a Christ follower, now he goes and does jail ministry and all this stuff. I'm proud of him. But he crawls down on the floor with my kids and starts playing games with them. Yeah. And I'm just sitting there. I was sitting in my chair, and I was just like looking at that. I was like, what? It's like, and I don't have memories of that. I'm not saying it never happened. I want to be fair. I don't remember playing with my dad. When I was old enough to remember, I don't remember it happening. But my dad crawled down on the floor with my kids and played with them for over an hour on the floor. Yeah. Just to get down with them on their level and play with them. And I just remember sitting there thinking, man, that's only God can do that. Me and him, and then me and my kids. My kids know my dad in a way I didn't because of Jesus.
That's right.
And the Lord can restore anything, man.
And that wound, that father wound you have, God used that to make you a really good dad. It made it a gigantic challenge for me. It was so important to me. And without that father wound, you probably wouldn't have been as good a dad as you are.
Oh, I would say not. Absolutely not. Yeah. I mean, that was my catalyst. When my oldest son was born, I was already well on my way to messing up everything with him. And I was just like, wait a second. I always said I wouldn't do this. Yeah.
I remember just got out of prison, 2009. I was DNA tested 6 months before I got out to see if I was this little boy's dad. Mm-hmm. Somehow I got his biological mom's address from somebody, and I wrote her a letter. And I just said, if I am his father, I want to know, I want to be DNA tested.
Yeah.
And she sent me the negative test results of the guy she thought was the dad. One of those deals,
Wow. Yeah.
I won't say how it all happened, but it was just like, it was drug house, trap house stuff. And so I got tested, and then I called him when I got out, and they told me I was his father. Long story short, he was in a bad situation. He's 2.5 years old, and I went after him, and wasn't married, wasn't on the DNA test is all I had to go on, but I was never married to her, no custody order. And anyways, it got to the point where I could have weekends with him. And I remember he's 2.5 years old, and I'm looking at this little boy.
Yeah.
And I never had a dad, Jake.
Yeah.
Never. My dad died when I was in diapers. My mom never got married after that. But I remember looking at him and thinking, I'm going to fail you.
Mm-hmm. Been there.
I can't do this.
Yeah.
No way I can do this. And I didn't want to fail him. And by God's grace, today he's 18 years old, and he just graduated today. He finished his high set, and he seems like he's doing really good. And anyway, so for me, I just want to encourage the fathers listening today. There's some guys that are on the Pando app in prison. They're watching this. Mm-hmm. They're the biker dad.
Right.
That has not been there for their children. And so I hope a couple things. I hope from this podcast that those with a criminal mentality can see that there are some police officers out there that don't hate them.
Right.
And do care.
Yeah.
And then that God can use your bad parenting for his glory.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyways, all right, brother. Well, thank you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah, for real.
Okay, well, thank you guys for joining us and being a part of this podcast with us. If you like the podcast, One Broken Life, you can like and subscribe. You can share it with your friends. If you want to be a partner with Freeway Ministries, this is a podcast done by and production of Freeway Ministries. You can go to our website, freeway-ministries.com. You can become a partner with us and help us continue to reach one broken life at a time. I'm John. This is Jake. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.